Welcome back. Thanks for those who are watching, I guess, week in and week out. My name is JJ, of course, and heaps to dive into once again. I tell you what, it's absolutely freezing, chilly as in this part of the world, Geelong, Victoria at the moment, but the footy is white hot. It is red hot every single weekend. Another gigantic weekend of footy. It started on Friday night and it just continued across the weekend. So much to debrief on. But as I said off the top, before I get stuck in, thanks to those who are watching week in, week out. The numbers have been really, really good. Don't expect to have a mammoth audience. It's for those who like to just think about the game forensically, those who like to really dive deeply into certain aspects of the sport. I guess less about the comic relief. We can leave that to others who want to be humorous or attempt to be humorous. Some are, some aren't, but certainly thanks to those who are engaging on the socials, loving all of the interaction on the social media platforms. Also, those leaving comments in the YouTube channel in the comments section. Make sure you keep doing that as well. On the episode today, or as you're watching / listening, because some people do listen via their podcast platforms and don't watch. So thanks to both groups of people. But Jack Buckley, the Giants defender, we know a couple of weeks ago he did a big-time shutdown job on Charlie Curnow. It hasn't earned him a trip to the Paris Olympics. And his girlfriend, for those who are unaware, his girlfriend is competing in the Paris Olympics, and he is at this point unable to go, not allowed to go. So we'll talk about whether he should be able to go in a moment. Jason Horne-Francis, always a topic of discussion, and he was an angry Hornet on Sunday. He needs to get that in check. Quick, smart. Chicken wings, I love them, but the AFL dislike, and we're seeing some chicken wings come into the game, some tackles I'm talking about. For those who don't know what a chicken wing is in an AFL sense, we're seeing some creep into the game. I'll tell you why, and there is a pretty obvious reason why. I want to talk to you about not passing judgment week by week. Pass your judgment in windows. Use it doesn't look much like a window, but use windows of the season to try and judge your team or other teams, because you'll go crazy trying to be reactive to what happens from week to week, because we've got the most equal season we've ever seen. The Blues ruck situation, I think there is an easy way to rationalise what the Blues are doing in terms of their overall selection, but certainly in the ruck. We know that Pitnet and De Koning played last weekend. I don't think that'll happen long term. We'll talk about that. The Bombers, they've got a big problem, and it's their little guys, or lack thereof. They haven't got any forward pressure inside their forward 50. They've got some starkly poor numbers when it comes to tackles inside 50, a key metric when it comes to being a really strong defensive team, because your first line of defense is actually your forward line these days. And the Toby show, I spoke about Toby Greene last week and the fact his numbers were way down on his 2023 campaign. Well, he got back to somewhere near his best on the weekend against Richmond. So plenty to dive into. Let's dive straight into it. Jack Buckley is where we'll start. It was an interesting little story I saw online. The great Jay Clark was the man who found or come up or broke the story. So Jack Buckley is or his girlfriend is Celeste Mucci. I hope that's the correct pronunciation of her name. Apologies if not. She is on her way to compete in the 100-meter hurdles at the Paris Olympic Games. An amazing achievement. Congratulations to her, and I hope she does incredibly well. But Jack Buckley, as the story goes, written by Jay Clark in the Herald Sun and online, he's at this point not allowed / unable / has been declined by the club to be able to go and watch her. Now, of course, there's some matches that Jack Buckley would or should be playing in, but we have seen clubs take a different stance on these types of issues, even I guess as recently as earlier in the season. So Asheen Mullen, the Irishman from Geelong, went back to Ireland for a family situation. We also saw Ed Langdon allowed to travel into Europe to attend a family celebration as well. But Adam Kingsley at this point is saying, no, you're staying here, Jack, and you are going to play footy. So I guess I'm interested, and I'm really putting it out there to you guys and girls who are watching/listening. Let me know on, I guess, on social media or in the comments section on YouTube. Do you think Jack Buckley should be allowed to go? Do you think he should go? Do you think he should want to go? Because I find it really interesting, and particularly, I guess, with the movement of players being allowed to go and do certain things. I remember a teammate of mine, I won't name him, but he had to fight tooth and nail even at Christmas time. During the Christmas holiday period where we had 2 or 3 weeks off, he had to fight tooth and nail to be allowed to go to a family wedding in Europe. And that was during his I guess, annual leave. Now, that's to the other extent, the extreme end of, trying to keep your players in one place and making sure they're training and preparing as best they can. But this is an end season thing. Would it be different if Jack and Celeste were married? I don't know. Do you think he should be looking to go, or should he be focused on his job, focused on playing footy? Should he put his hand up to say, well, I'll go and you can take a week's pay from me? I'm not sure what the correct answer is. Maybe it's just rotten bad luck for him and he needs to stay up all night and watch her on the TV and hope she does a very, very good job. What if she makes it through to a semi-final or makes it through to the final and she's competing for a gold medal and it clashes with a big game of footy? I'm not exactly sure how the dates line up with the schedules, but I mean, if it were me and I was playing footy, I would probably expect to be able to go and support my other half and going and watching her compete in an Olympic Games. It comes up once every 4 years. We're playing 22, 23, potentially finals, potentially 25, 26 games per season. Is this conversation different if Sam Taylor's not injured? That's an interesting element to the story as well. So I'm not sure. They do say, or we do say, that family is number one. I guess in this situation, footy has become number one and family's number two. So I don't know what the right answer is. I would probably like to think, if I was a senior coach, I'd say to Jack, you know what? What goes around comes around. Go and support your partner. Go over there, make it as quick a trip as possible, get back here, and hopefully you can perform for us. So let me know. Leave a comment. Do you think Jack Buckley should be allowed to go to Paris and support his partner Celeste in the Olympic Games? Moving along swiftly to I called the Port Adelaide and Gold Coast game on Sunday for SEN Radio, and it was a bit of it turned into a cracker. I love the way both teams went about it in the end. It was a high enough scoring game. Port Adelaide chipped the ball around a little bit, became a little bit nauseating at different stages, but both teams were able to score. Gold Coast, of course, came out on top, but it was Jason Horne-Francis who I think was the story of the game, and not for the right reasons. He's a phenomenon. I think he's the most talented, most exciting player in the competition. He's that good. We had Chad Corns on Melbourne radio before the game, and he said, for those who are old enough to know and those who follow or have followed SANFL footy, he was saying that some people think Jason Horne-Francis is potentially the greatest SA footballer since Russell Ebert. Now, you can think about all the names that have come through South Australian footy. Chad Corns is saying that he might be one of the best of all time. And I agree. I don't know about some of those SANFL guys, but I'm just saying or telling you what I'm seeing. He is a phenomenal talent. He is a game-breaking, game-changing talent. But on Sunday, he didn't touch the ball in the first quarter. He spent some time in the forward line, and he ended up getting incredibly frustrated and giving away terrible free kicks. So in dead ball situations, on at least 2 occasions, there was one stoppage where he gave away a free kick for a crude tackle. He threw someone to ground and then followed it up and gave away 50. It ended up being a shot at goal and a goal. He did that again a little bit later. So he gave away at least 2 or 3 free kicks in dead ball situations. He also added a 50-metre penalty to one of those instances as well. And he was seen, on the bench. Ken Hinkley made a point again. We've seen it before. Made a point of going and sitting next to him, having a sustained period where he chatted with him and tried to talk him through what was acceptable. he's very disengaged as a teammate. He doesn't often engage in the rest of his teammates. He doesn't look like he has much to say on the footy field. Now, some of the better players I've played with in my time, Rory Laird's not a big talker, just goes about his business and gets the job done. But he doesn't look like he's got anything to say. He doesn't look like he necessarily gets around his teammates that much. He does it a bit when things are going well. But teams will be onto it. Teams will be straight onto this now. You can niggle him. You can nag at him. You can try and be physical with him. You can get in his head. You can start to talk to him and see what's happening. And maybe, just maybe, he'll continue to give away some of these silly free kicks and really costly free kicks. Every time you give one away, you're just giving field position away, you're giving territory away, which is so crucial in today's footy. Ken Hinkley said afterward, quote, we will not accept that. He's learned a lot, but he's got a lot more to learn. So Ken Hinkley's not happy with it, happy enough to say so after the game. Again, I'll emphasise he's a remarkable talent. He might just be the most talented player, the most prodigiously talented player in the game who has the highest ceiling, but he's got to get this stuff under control because the other teams will absolutely go after him. Now, chicken wings, as I mentioned, not the food variety, and I do love a chicken wing, I can tell you that for free, but in the AFL, we're seeing them creep in, and they're only creeping in, but we have seen 3 or 4 or 5 start to come into the game. And now I ask you, and there's a simple reason for it. Once upon a time, AFL coaches would always coach one thing when it comes to tackling or being tackled. So if you're the tackler or the player laying the tackle, be stronger than the ball carrier. So dominate that player whilst you're laying the tackle. Because if you're weaker than the ball carrier, that person can freeze arms, can potentially break your tackle, can find a way to get that ball away or get that ball onto the boot. So be stronger than the ball carrier. Now, once upon a time, that would mean taking that player to ground, throwing them on the deck, making them earn it, making them feel it. You can't do that anymore, or you are very, very much putting yourself at risk by doing that these days. If a player's to hit their head, you're in big, big trouble. So what we're seeing, and players, give them credit, they adjust super quick. So they've already adjusted some of them. And we're seeing AFL players lay a really strong tackle, but hold a player upright on their feet, but pinning an arm, grabbing a wing and making it a chicken wing tackle. Now, some people have said, I've seen Mark Robinson and a few others say that chicken wing tackles are very, very dangerous. I think it's quite a controlled way to lay a tackle. Now, obviously, if you take that too far, and you really wrench that arm and you potentially hurt a player's shoulder, there should be significant consequences for that. And I'm sure that fits into the criteria with the match review officer somewhere, somehow, some way. But as a tackling player, you have to have an ability to still make a tackle worthwhile. Otherwise, what's the point in tackling? We may as well all wear flags like flag football and make it tag. Because if you can't throw a player to the ground and you can't lay or you can't pin an arm, you're running out of ways to be able to lay a tackle. So I think the chicken wing tackle is probably here to stay. It's a controlled way to lay a tackle. Otherwise, the player with the footy can simply fight the tackle and be way too strong for that person trying to lay a tackle. So I don't think it's necessarily a dangerous way to tackle. I think if it's done properly, we might see 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, where the player just gets in a vulnerable position and might just wrench a shoulder. But for the most part, I think the chicken wing tackle might be here to stay. The AFL, I mentioned how unpredictable it was, and it's going to continue to be that way. So just go easy when it comes to passing judgment on your team. I know Jared Waitley on his Monday morning show has snap judgments. I know Dwayne Russell in the afternoons has the you call, you get on, ring up, let us know what you're thinking. I know, there are various other ways, particularly with social media, to shout from the rooftops, to be the first one to say this, that, or the other about your footy club. But I've heard it all already, and none of it or some of it has been true at one point and untrue at another. Gold Coast are gone. They can't win on the road. They go home and they beat good teams. They remain undefeated at home. Sydney, They've come back to the pack. They've dropped a couple. They're back in amongst the other teams who are chasing that premiership. All of a sudden now they're clear-cut number one because they go home and they smash the Kangaroos. The Blues have got issues. All of a sudden the Blues have got issues. They're pig-headed. They're arrogant. They're not treating the game with the respect it deserves. That's what they're saying about the Blues. 2-3 weeks ago, they were the number one seed, even above the Sydney Swans. Brisbane were written off 3 weeks into the season when they were zipping, when they were owing. Now, they're probably the most consistently performed team over the past 3 months. So what I'm saying to you is we've got a competition that is so equal and so level and so unpredictable that the only certainty is unpredictability. So take round 19, for example. Adelaide could easily win this Friday night against the Bombers. Easily. They could upset the Bombers, and it wouldn't be an upset. We shouldn't call it an upset. Gold Coast, could they go and win the Expansion Cup against the Giants? Would you really be stunned if Gold Coast finally go on the road and win a game? They've been so good at home. Would it surprise you if they did it on the road against the Giants and the Giants had a slip up? Wouldn't surprise me. Collingwood and Hawthorn is a genuine 50-50. It was the last time they played where Hawthorn rallied and came back and eventually fell short by 5 points. The Dogs can go to Geelong and upend the Pussycats. Don't worry about the markets telling you. The Dogs can go there and get it done for sure. The Lions and the Swans play each other this week in Brisbane. Imagine the declarations from all in sundry. If the Lions win and win well, they can win the premiership. Are they the premiership favourite? What happens if they slip up the week after? When we're reactive to results, and we're reactive to results on a weekly basis, I think we set ourselves up for failure somewhat because the competition is so even. What about the Ds? They're back in the hunt. They were about gone, right? That we're all saying, and I was guilty of this, and I'm guilty of doing this at different stages as well. I'm putting my hand in the air saying that I'm hopeful and I'm going to attempt to try and look at things through a 3 or 4 week window. How's the team performed over a month? Not over a week, because I understand you can go on the road and you can struggle to beat good teams. You can have good teams come and play against you and you can get beaten. So what does it look like over a month? But the Ds go to Perth and play Fremantle. Most of you would say, well, Fremantle will win that. It's in Perth. They're on the rebound from a loss in Tassie. But what about Melbourne? They look good. Melksham and Turner in the forward line. Bailey Fritsch is back in some form. They won against Essendon without a ruckman. And they'll be out to avenge an embarrassing loss in the Alice Springs against these same Dockers. So there's a handful of games this weekend where the result, one way or the other, the market or popular opinion might be trying to tell us one thing, but the reality is a result either way should be no surprise to you. And you should just get used to the fact, because that's what we've always wanted. We've wanted as many teams as possible genuinely competitive against any other team on any given day at any given venue. And we've basically got that at the moment. Sure, Richmond, North Melbourne and West Coast have been eliminated from finals contention. And Adelaide and St Kilda are not going to play finals footy. But no one wants to run into Adelaide. St Kilda just beat the Sydney Swans. So don't be seduced by thinking week to week, this team are the best, this team can't win it, blah, blah, blah. It's dangerous. And I think you should try and look at things from a little bit more of a level perspective. But I know we love to be the first and be the most accurate. Now, 3 quick ones before we get out of here, because time is of the essence as always. The Blues. Now, everyone knows that Tom De Koning has emerged as their number one ruckman. I looked at some of the numbers from their contest last week against the Dogs. He didn't go to enough contests. He didn't go to enough stoppages. I think he was involved in about 49 stoppages. There were over 90 in the game. Not enough. Now, Mark Pitnet was in the team. I think Pitnet comes into that team for, well, because, at different stages, he deserves the opportunity to play AFL football. But also Tom De Koning could probably do with some load management, if you like, even in-game load management. I think they're trying to ensure that De Koning is in the same form that he was 2 or 3 weeks ago when the finals start, which is dangerous and tricky. because I understand what they're doing. You can't afford to run out of puff. We saw a Port Adelaide team go on a 12, 13 game winning streak and then have nothing left for the finals and get bundled out in straight sets because most of those players may well have been physically and mentally exhausted. So De Koning, as probably a first-year full-time ruckman, just needs the occasional chop out. Maybe it's better from their perspective if he needs a chop out or you think he needs one, just don't play him. Just give him a week off. Just genuinely rest him because he didn't have much impact in the game. He looked good each time he went into the ruck, but his numbers just weren't there. His impact wasn't there, and Pitnet was unable to be subbed from the game because they had an injury elsewhere to Zach Williams. So I understand what the Blues are doing. I understand why they did it, but I just wonder subconsciously, does it send a message to the rest of the group that, we're just biding our time until we get to finals? Well, you're not in the finals yet. You're not in the top four yet. You haven't locked away a top two spot either. You've still got some ground to cover, but it is a balancing act when you need to ensure that your best players are at their best late in the season. They do need Jack Martin back. I'm not exactly sure where he's at, but he's the wild card they need. He plays particularly well when Mackay goes into the ruck and Martin becomes that secondary aerial target. He can put some defensive pressure on. He's good on the lead. He's an accurate kick. They do need him in that forward mix. So hopefully for Blues fans and for Jack Martin's sake, he can get back sooner rather than later. Toby Greene was on the agenda last week, and I'd mentioned I did the deep dive on his numbers. He'd only had 8 games through 15 on the season where he'd had 1 goal or no goals. So 8 of his 15 games, he was either kicking 1 or none, which is so far down on what he did in 2023. He'd also only had 5 games this season where he'd had 15 plus touches and kicked 2 plus goals. He did that 17 times in 2023. Well, on the weekend, he was back in business, 17 touches, 4 goals. He laid 4 tackles and he had 4 goal assists. So he's kicked 4 and he's set up for the Giant skipper could be back. He and Jesse Hogan, they're a different dynamic duo, but they're certainly a dangerous duo at that. They are the focus of my 7 AFL social video this week. So make sure you check that out on Instagram and X via 7 AFL, just talking about how those two work so well together. They're accurate kicks. They're strong marks. They can kick goals in general play, and they can both get on the lead and be setting up or getting things done for other players, making players around them better. Jesse Hogan and Toby Greene. And finally, before I get out of here, the Bombers, they've got a problem with their lack of forward pressure. They've got plenty of talls. They haven't got many smalls. So you look at their forward line from that contest against the D's where they went down. They had Kyle Langford there. They had Jake Stringer. They had Harrison Jones floating in and out, Nate Caddy, and Peter Wright. They also had Matt Guelphy, who some will say, well, Matt Guelphy's a pressure player. I see Matt Guelphy as more of a defensive-minded, shoulder-to-shoulder with the opponent's best, half-back or intercepting player. He's not – I can't recall him, running down players or laying big smothers or putting perceived pressure on the opposition defenders when they're trying to move the ball out of their D50. Kyle Langford's the only player from Essendon inside the top 25 for tackles inside forward 50. And Langford's not really known for his forward pressure either. So he's the only one inside the top 25 in the competition. And Essendon are only 10th. They rank 10th overall for tackles inside 50 as a team. So it's not the be-all and end-all. There are stats that are certainly way more important, but I think it just speaks to a lack of forward pressure, a lack of real heat in that forward 50. When the other team get the ball, it's just too easy for them to get it out. We saw, even though it was quite slippery and wet and rained heavily at different stages, Melbourne were able to transition the ball from one end of the ground to the other. And that's not something you would accuse Melbourne of being super at across the season. So Brad Scott and his coaching crew have got to find a way to get some pressure inside that forward 50. You can probably leave a tall out of the lineup, but you need the guys who can lay those type of tackles and put that type of pressure on. I had a look at their injury list. I had a look at their VFL team. Not certain there's a heap of guys who can play it, so they might need to get creative with someone laying some tackles inside forward 50. The Bombers are on the menu. First up for round 19, they play the Crows, a genuine trick game, a real banana peel game for the Bombers. That's the first game on the slate when it comes to round 19. You can see that game live on Channel 7. Looking forward to that. Essendon, Adelaide. Couple of my former teams, of course, so a little bit more interest for me, perhaps, than some, but I think that's going to be a fascinating contest, and it just continues across the weekend. Round 19 is going to be unbelievable. Round 18 was, round 17 was. This weekend will be just as good. Thanks for watching. Those who are locked in and loaded each and every week, I thank you very, very much, and enjoy the footy.